Hello, I'm Robert Horton. I'm a member of the National Society of Film Critics, and I'm the programmer historian in residence at Scarecrow Video. Try to remember that if you can. Once again, in the fall of 2021, I'm proud to be leading Scarecrow Academy, an online discussion group that is presented by the nonprofit Scarecrow Video in Seattle. Our series is a continuation of The Art in Noir, Film Noir and the Director. So it's part two. We're on the sequel now, and we are looking at four classics of film noir from the great era of noir, and then four neo-noir, if we may say that. And we're discussing them with an emphasis on the art of the director. You don't have to have attended any of the previous sessions if you are stumbling across this for the first time. Please join us. The series is free, held via Zoom, takes place on Saturdays at 2 p.m. Pacific time. You can go to the Scarecrow Academy page. You may find a link to that if you're looking at this on YouTube or wherever, and Scarecrow will email you back and tell you how to sign up for this session or for all of the remaining sessions. Our next meeting takes place on Saturday, October 23rd, with a conversation about Stanley Kubrick's 1956 film, The Killing. So here we're going to introduce that film and the filmmaker in anticipation of that session, if the filmmaker needs introduction. Maybe he does not. Before he became one of the sort of celestial gods of cinema, Stanley Kubrick was not dreaming yet of Dr. Strangelove or 2001: A Space Odyssey or The Shining. He was an independent filmmaker trying to start a career in the movies. And with his third feature, The Killing, he made that happen. This is a heist movie that totally ticks the boxes for that particular kind of crime subgenre. But it's also an ingenious and very modern sort of film noir. I think clearly pushing the format into the future, laced with this very wry, pessimistic attitude. And we have to say it is crammed with aromatic character actors. Stanley Kubrick was born in 1928 in New York City. Clearly a brilliant character even in his youth. He became a photographer for one of the country's leading graphic magazines, Look, when he was still a teenager. And he did two feature films that sort of qualify as, I think you could say, learning experiences of a prodigy, Fear and Desire, Kubrick later totally disowned, and Killer's Kiss. And then Kubrick turned to The Killing, which is based on a novel called Clean Slate by the prolific crime writer Lionel White. Kubrick wrote the screenplay with another notable crime writer, Jim Thompson. That's a very hip inspiration on Kubrick's part, I believe, long before Thompson was taken up by the intelligentsia some decades later. Not only was Thompson an ace writer of hard-boiled dialogue, but he brought a kind of deranged quality to the structure and the approach of some of his novels, including the psychopathic voiceovers of novels like The Killer Inside Me and Population 1280, characters who are seemingly bland on the surface but are just absolute crazy psychopaths. Population 1280, by the way, later became a terrific film by the French director Bertrand Tavernier called Coup de Torchon. It seems to me in lots of ways the heist gone wrong picture is really an ideal one for Kubrick, especially for a kind of budding filmmaker who's trying to practice on something. It affords a certain amount of cinematic interest and suspense, but because the heist genre so often leads to failure and double crossing and disappointment, this folds neatly into Kubrick's skeptical view of mankind and our aspirations. And while some might say that Kubrick was surely influenced on this project by The Asphalt Jungle, John Huston's heist picture of 6 years or so earlier, including sharing Sterling Hayden as the lead actor, Kubrick nevertheless works variations of his own on this, including something that is from the novel, which was a sort of fractured approach to time and storytelling, especially on the day of the heist, where you have these different threads of the plot, and instead of being cross-cut in linear time in the usual fashion of movies, they play out in pieces. So one piece moves along, and then it jerks back to a few hours earlier, and then another thread will move along, and then we'll get jerked back again to earlier in the day. And this is a device that Kubrick organizes on screen by using the same shots of horses at a racetrack. Be prepared for the big race. This repetition lets us know that we're curling back in time again. And although we might not notice it the first time you watch the movie, but Kubrick has actually prepared us for this day of the heist technique in the opening moments of the film's introductions of its characters, which play a similar sort of game. Also, we should say those introductions are part of the film's voiceover narration, which supposedly Kubrick did not want to do. Although I'm not clear on how you could make this movie without some kind of voiceover narration to sort of line things up for you. But remember that Kubrick used quite a few narrators in his subsequent films. And that there's something, the narrator in The Killing is so stentorian, he almost comes across as a parody of this kind of stentorian narrator in this kind of movie, which is something that I wouldn't necessarily put past the future director of Dr. Strangelove. The film has a wonderful visual texture too, some scenes in dark rooms lit with sort of stark, cold lighting. Some of them look like shots from an early 50s graphic magazine, actually. And they're very notable for not looking like traditional Hollywood photography of, let's say, a decade or so earlier. There are many moments in the film in which the camera moves as though kind of carried away by the forward motion of the heist plot, even though, as we've said, that forward motion frequently halted in its tracks by the unusual structure. Kubrick does love to move the camera, and that's something that's been much remarked on about his work. And yes, he does this in The Killing quite a bit, maybe to capture the energy of the story, perhaps to suggest how everybody here is kind of moving around like a rat in a maze. But the one thing about camera movement to remember is that a part of the effect of directors who move the camera a lot is what happens when you stop. How does that sudden arrest, suddenly do something to your eyeballs and your brain? So that, for instance, when the camera holds on one of the sort of eerily understated arguments that are happening between the married couple played by Elisha Cook Jr. and Marie Windsor, the effect is really powerful. And now they're not rats moving in a maze, now they're rats in a trap. Kubrick had a fine eye for character actors, and The Killing bulges with them, from Cook and Windsor to the uniquely bizarre Timothy Carey, about whom much can be said, to stalwarts like J.C. Flippin and Ted DeCorsia, to this burly chess player philosopher played by a guy named Cola Quariani, who's not an actor but a wrestler that Kubrick had befriended at a chess club in New York. The Killing wasn't a big box office hit, but it got really strong reviews. It kind of brought Kubrick to the attention of Hollywood in a way that he had not been before, and really led to his hiring as the director of his next couple of Hollywood projects, Paths of Glory and Spartacus, and the path to glory, to one of the greatest cinema careers was in the making. We're going to talk about these various things and whatever you would like to bring to the table when we gather on Saturday, October 23rd, to discuss Stanley Kubrick's The Killing.